you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate having you. As always, you guys are the greatest audience ever known to man. And all the audiences in all the worlds, in all the universes that have ever been assembled, you guys are the greatest audience. You've been sticking with us through 16 years of just incredible guests and idiot host, I should say, me, and 2,000 episodes. So we really appreciate it. As always, refer to the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Goodreads.com/Chris Voss, YouTube.com/Chris Voss, all those crazy places on the internet. Today we have an amazing young man on the show. He's got several books forthcoming we'll get into, and some of the things he's going to enlighten and brighten in your mind and make your life better. Or else. I don't know what that means. I like putting a lot of pressure on our poor guests that come on the show, and they're like, what am I going to do again? I don't remember signing up for all this. Anyway, John Taylor McEntire is the founder of Mutual Prosperity. He's going to be joining us on the show. He brings a wealth of diverse global insights to his innovative S.Y.N.C method, S.Y.N.C method. His personal journey has taken him across continents, through many cultures, and into the heart of varied business landscapes, from Salt Lake City to Tokyo to Doha. Drawing from his rich tapestry of experiences, including his deep understanding of Eastern consensus-building strategies and Western innovation principles, John has crafted a proven system that provides a political framework for success, empowering individuals and teams to unlock their full potential. Welcome to the show, John. How are you?
Doing great. And your opening is like incredible, Chris. That's awesome. That's really fun.
You gotta love it. But yeah, so I'm going to take and say, give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, mutualprosperity.com. Mm-hmm. One word, mutual prosperity.
What does mutual prosperity mean to you? What is that about?
I believe that everybody is here on this earth for a purpose.
To be stupid? No, I'm just kidding. That's not right.
Everybody's here on earth for a purpose, but the fact of the matter is the majority of the people, high 80% of people don't find that purpose. Okay. Not that they're stupid. It's just that I think our education
system... for myself, mostly.
Yeah, I think our education system, our political landscape, our leadership is waning in this area. It doesn't really do much in this area, and so people don't really have the opportunity to find who they are. And when people can find who they are, they actually can do lots of different things. So I feel like everybody's like a piece of this puzzle of life, and we just don't let people to actually shape themselves into what they should be. So mutual prosperity means that, we should all be in this together and try to make a more mutually prosperous society. And I think the more we work together and actually gel, then we're actually going to be able to bring in, a lot more success, a lot more, vitality, and a lot more life into our being.
More vitality, more life. And I do play off the George Carlin joke. Was it 50% of the people think how the average person's IQ, and never mind. Anyway, it's a good joke. So we have some fun, but mostly my journey through life is being a complete idiot. So I just kind of throw myself under the bus on those jokes. So give us a little bit more about what you do there. Talk about some of the things that you do to help people and work with them.
Yeah. So basically, if you think about, a company as it's hiring people, it's usually the HR team that's doing that, and they have this checklist. And the checklist says, okay, what degrees do they have? What certifications do they have? What, qualifications do they have? Like in how many places have they worked, and what did they do? How long did they work there, and everything? And so you have all these checklist aspects, but what's missing is, really, what is that person like? And, culturally, socially, how can you actually get the best out of them? And that's what we're trying to do, is to help organizations understand that people are more than just what is written on paper. And if we're able to actually pull that out of them and enable them to do their jobs, which doesn't happen very often. People are kind of set into a position, and then that position, they're supposed to do that job, and they try to do that job, but there's roadblocks there. They're not supposed to step outside this box, or that box. They can't do these things, and so we really hamstrung these people and everything. But this really came out of my background growing up in a home where we had, lots of different cultures in our house all the time. So I had 5 siblings, 2 cousins that lived with us like intermittently. We had 2 Navajo foster brothers who were with us in the school years. We had a whole slew of international exchange students from Japan, Germany, Uruguay, you name it. And then we had some humanitarian refugees, from Laos. And so from a very young age, I was having to recognize that there's people who think differently than me as this white guy in a middle-class upbringing that helped me understand that there was more to life than what I was thinking there was. And I'm one who actually believes a lot in intuition, and intuition is kind of like what shaped me. And at the age of 9, I had a really groundbreaking awakening happen, and that was I was laying on the sofa in my living room, and it was after dinner. We had some friends over for dinner. This lady who came, we had seen her in a musical the night before at the Playhouse in town, and so she and my mom were talking about this musical, and I was interested in the musical that we watched, and it was fun and everything, but she was talking about how important how fun it was to be in the theater and all this exciting stuff. And then she told my mom, "Hey, Nancy, there's going to be tryouts for The Sound of Music in about a month, and you ought to try out." My mom just kind of flatly just dismissed her and says, "Oh, that would be silly. I can't see myself doing that." The lady left, and I had this like burning in my heart that I was supposed to go and try out for this audition. And I told my parents, and they said, "Oh, John, that's really cute. You've never sung in front of anybody, and you don't even talk to people. So how could you even get on a stage?" And so they just kind of belittled it. And so for the next, couple weeks, during carpool or dinners or whatever, I'd bring this up, and they would always just dismiss it. And so finally I said a couple days before, "I'm supposed to go to this. If you're not going to take me, then I'm going to take the bus." And if I took the bus, that would take me into a very dangerous part of town. And so they took me. And when I got on the stage of this audition, my number was called. I told the accompanist that I was going to sing Edelweiss, and I got up there, opened my mouth, and this big voice came out, and the room went completely silent. And so I knew that was one of my callings in life because of what I was able to do with music. After that, for 10 years, from 9 until 19, I had been in over 30 productions, had some little television stints, nothing big, just little part play things, and then was a soloist in the choir. But the theater was interesting with the performance side, but that was not really what made me who I am. What really happened was that I understood that the theater was not just these people with their names on the marquee, okay? These famous people. It wasn't these stars. It was actually this community. So it was a mini cosmos, and it was the city. And the city happened to have a mayor who was the director. And the director needed to have the writers and the stagehands, the audio, the music, the lights, people costuming, everybody, the villagers, whatever, everybody had a part in this thing. And so this is where the puzzle pieces actually started to come into play. And I understood that everybody had a part in this mini cosmos. And if you didn't have all those parts working together, then it wouldn't work well. So in the theater, of course, you have the green room, which is a place where you go and have like your, if it was in football, you'd be having your huddle, and you'd be kind of making sure everybody was on the same page, and we're getting ready to go out there and tackle this whole game and everything. I realized that if that green room was gelling, really vibing well, people were really connected, and there was just really good feelings in there, then you knew that show was going to be like an A+ show. Mm-hmm. But if there was these petty jealousies, if people just weren't really working together, they didn't want to help each other out, you knew it was going to be B- or lower grade. And that really helped me understand that we all have this piece of this puzzle, and without every single piece of the puzzle, then it makes it difficult. So anyway, that was in my background. At age 11, I started my first job, and worked at my dad's. Was an orthopedic surgeon. I worked at his office. I was a file clerk, and I learned actually where my place was in this organization, because I had a little bit big of a head at the time, being the doctor's son. And I was told that you can see the door there if you don't change your thinking. You have a part, and it's a minor part, but it's an important part in records. But you need to be nice to everybody. And so I learned from that point on that I need to be nice. So having all these different jobs, flipping hamburgers at Wendy's, delivering pizza at Pizza Hut, doing construction, putting insulation in. It was a very dirty job. I managed, apartment buildings for my dad, which was really gross because people would just trash these places, and like you'd be dealing with sewage, and I mean, you just name it. But I got to understand that everybody, I'm walking in all these different types of shoes and recognizing jobs I like, jobs I don't like, jobs I don't want to do ever again. But I'm really gaining appreciation for how these people are. So with that context, I really tried to understand that, how do I make sure that I'm doing my part so that other people can do their parts better? And that's where the idea of mutual prosperity came from. I wouldn't say back then I was thinking mutual prosperity, because I wasn't, but mutual prosperity came out of my career in 35 years working in technology transfer. And what technology transfer is, you have your research organizations, such as, major research universities, and then the national laboratories, which I've worked for all of these different groups. And they have, they're receiving billions of dollars for funding. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are saying, should we be funding these activities and everything? And I think we actually should be, because I've seen the inner workings of this. But doing technology transfer as a director of an office, basically you're an innovation ecosystem enabler. That's what I call myself. And basically you have to pull all these pieces together to get people to fund your activities. You've got these nascent technologies that need to have like demonstration models made, prototypes made. You need to look at marketing. Is it something that's fit for the market? If it is, then is it something we can patent or have other types of intellectual property take place? How do we get it out to the groups? And then who do we license it to? And then comes startup activity. So all those things came into play, and all that community building was really key in putting that stuff together. So that kind of gives you a flow of what, where I came from, initially, and then what I ended up doing. And then from that, because of my work in startups myself, but also working with startups in the tech industry because of my licensing activities and then being mentors to them, that's where I'm working on my book, which is Sync to the Beat of Success, Mastering the Rhythms of Innovation, Leadership, and Global Growth in Tech. Anyway, I've said too much right now, and I'll let you.
No, you gave us the lowdown, man. We got it down now. Tell us about the Sync method. I think you may have touched on it or alluded to it, but are we clear on what Sync stands for and what it means?
Yeah, so basically, one of the things I worked in Japan for 7 years, and my degree was in Japanese with Asian studies. And so the Eastern cultures very early on, just one aspect, by the time I was 22, I had traveled to all 50 states and 22 countries by that time. I went to 19 countries by 22. And so I had lived in Japan, taking a break from university. And then when I went back to university, I changed my major to Japanese, because this was like pre-height of the Japanese economy. And I wanted to be a consultant in Japan. And so the thing that actually really triggered me in regards to synchronization was the fact that you had, Tokyo, one of the biggest cities in the world, and, boatloads of people. And, they live in like these rabbit hutches is what people call them. And they're right on top of each other. And I'm just thinking, how do these people live so nicely amongst each other? Mm-hmm. How do they, generate so much peace and tranquility and everything? And I learned about these different consensus building methods, and these consensus building methods really struck my heart. So when I went back to university, I had to decide whether or not I wanted to take freshman writing or if I wanted to take a technical writing class. Now, by this time, because I had been in the arts, most of my childhood, I, not necessarily scientifically, inclined at that point, I thought I'm always trying to step outside my comfort zone. And I felt intuition saying, you need to take this technical writing class, which was actually absolutely important in regards to where my career went off on. But this technical writing class, everybody else for their class project was like an engineer doing, putting some gizmo together. Some chemist was talking about the recipe for some type of a chemical compound and all these things. So these very technical things, but I had talked my professor into allowing me to actually talk about the Dingy-Sato system, which is one of the consensus building systems. And so that Dingy-Sato system, what it is that it's taking, in the US, we have a top-down decision-making, plan. And that has its advantages because it's pretty quick and everything. But the disadvantages are that people down below, they don't feel like in the trenches that they're even a part of the decision. They don't even understand how this decision even came about or how they fit into that. And that always really bothered me. And so with this Dingy-Sato, it's Ringiseido. Mm-hmm. It's Dingy is a system of going around and getting approvals and everything, where the Sato is a system. And basically what they do is they'll start from a middle manager who has some people that works under him, works with him or her, and that middle manager will say, hey, we've got the workings of something that actually could solve some problems. And so they'll work with those people under them. And then they'll from there, it goes around and works with other managers of other groups that this whole type of thing may affect. And then it ultimately goes up to the top, which is usually the CEO or the president who puts the stamp of approval on it. So the process itself takes a little bit of time to get going, but because everybody's been involved with the process, by the time that it's stamped, okay, everybody's on board. And so once it's stamped, it just moves fast forward because everybody is just really rearing to go. And so that's where it really, outpaces whatever we can do in the Western world regards to things. So that's where the synchronization comes in. And the yourself, so synchronize yourself naturally within your community. The yourself part is that in 2020, during COVID time, I was living in Doha, Qatar. And at this time I had been there for about 8 years. My wife had promised me 5. And so we were kind of going past that. And I was trying to decide, how do I reinvent myself? And I ended up in a book writing class, and one of my coaches was Jack Canfield, who is the author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, which has sold 500 million copies. Oh, yeah. And so I became very enamored with him, but he's become my mentor, and he has a program called the Success Principles. Mm-hmm. And so I became a Success Principles methodology trainer. And so the yourself part, which is actually personalized, is how do you become a better leader? How do you make yourself enough to actually lead people and guide things to a greater result? And so that's one component, a big component inside that yourself aspect. When it comes to naturalize, this is aspects where we have a lot of things that are not necessarily innate in us. They're things that we need to kind of learn how to naturalize them into our lives. I would say that intuition is one of those for most people. Mm-hmm. Intuition is a little bit vague, people, they understand their gut feeling and stuff, but they don't understand how to actually utilize that. And so I talk a lot about how you create your sixth sense to the best of your ability, and then actually hone in on that to actually guide and direct you and different aspects of doing that. one other thing is that because of my work around the world, I've taken different contexts from different places, not just Japan, but Korea has something that's called nunchi, and this is how to read a room. And so if you're going into a boardroom, how do you fit in that room? How do you feel that people are thinking about you? How do you make sure you fit better? And how do you get people to feel comfortable with you? So that's another component of that. Sun Tzu was an ancient Chinese general, and I talk a lot about his book, or I'm enthralled with his book, The Art of War, and I read this every year. It's my ritual over the winter holidays, and it always gets me kind of re-geared in regards to how do I think about how do I think about winning the war, whatever the war is at that time, but without having to do any battle. And that's what his beauty was, you don't necessarily have to fight people, okay, to get what you want. You try to understand your enemies as well as your friends, and how do you make it so that you can get in their head and understand what they're thinking so that you can be ahead of the game, so that you can thwart off any type of activities. That's an aspect there. Also, innovation is a really important part, and something that I've learned from India was called Jugad. And Jugad is actually being minimalistic in regards to your creation of innovation. When I was in technology transfer at the University of Illinois, this was at the height of the dot-com boom. And I had so many people just clamoring for our technologies. The University of Illinois is where the first public web browser came from, Mosaic. And so lots of people were just wanting these technologies that I was representing. And so I had these startups, entrepreneurs just coming after me right and left. And I had to actually synchronize things within the university and the export control laws of the United States to get things going better so that we could actually get these out the door quicker. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that was just really kind of perplexing to me was that how did these companies that didn't have anything to show for money coming in, just money going out, they're raking in hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. And then they build these lavish places and they're catering food to their tribes, and they have these playrooms and everything. And I just thought, this is not how innovation comes about. In fact, I believe it thwarted innovation. So there was billions of dollars that was lost in all this activity as the dot-com boom busted. And so these ideas of Jugad, of trying to go from, thinking of having nothing or having very little to actually pull out the innovative stuff. When I worked in Doha and I was there, I worked for them for 10 years, money was just very plentiful. And this is one of those things that we had a hard time with because, they thought they could always pay for things just to get out of an issue. But actually it thwarts innovation, and it did during that time also. So we had to work other ways around of helping people to understand that scarcity has a place, and let's try and work with that and get resources that are convenient and everything. So that's the naturalize. On the communitize, it's very important to have that community. So we talked about the theater and how having that theater really gel and everybody actually doing their part, pulling their weight was actually able to help things out. But what I learned in the Middle East, and also from having my Navajo foster brothers, was the tribe concept is so important in those cultures. And there's a lot of things that we can learn about tribes. There's some things that aren't very good, like the silo mentality can come into there and everything. You get rid of that, but there's a lot of good things. And one of the things that came out of the Middle East was the concept of modulus. And I don't know if people understand what a modulus is, but it's these tents, okay, that people will have in their yards. And it's kind of like a man cave, if you will. And basically, it's a place where they're exchanging culture, they're exchanging the communication, they're teaching their youth, about history and about society and how it works. And then they're trying to push the youth to help them progress, above and beyond where they're at. And the one thing that's interesting about the modulus is that it doesn't really matter who you are. You could be the enemy, but you're always invited to the modulus. You can always come in. There's always the Arabic sweets, the Arabic tea, it's there, and people come together, and this is how a lot of problems are solved. So when you think about the conflicts that we have right now in the Middle East, a lot of activity is actually coming from this modulus concept of how do we bind together to actually solve this problem or not, but it's really that conglomeration of all those minds coming together and having a real culture. So that community is really crucial for us to actually, help each person build their puzzle piece, and how our puzzle pieces can be shaped better to allow them to do their work, and then they can allow us to do ours. And then if we can take that in a leadership mode from that personalized aspect to pull that out, that's how the S.Y.N.C system is supposed to work.
Awesome sauce. It sounds like, some of what you're saying is companies, organizations, and leadership needs to figure out how to sync up with new employees, how to make sure that there's some simpatico there, but also how to empower them, right? And not leave them in situations like you really referenced where they're disempowered or they've got limited. It's like they're asking. I've been asked to do crazy stuff when I work for other people, and you're just like, I don't really have all the tools to do that you want, or to do it right. So sounds like some of that's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that a lot of leaders struggle with is continuing education. Okay, these bigger players that are really got it going, they understand that continual education is something they have to do. But when it's a smaller player and they've got this finite amount of money that they need to deal with, when they're talking about, if I put them through this educational program, they're likely to go someplace else. But what I have to tell them is that if you don't teach them how to actually do their jobs and enable them to do that and actually get them excited about doing their job, then where are you at? You're losing out on potential there. So whatever potential you build, and the more buy-in that you get to have them actually buy into this goal of yours and this vision and this mission, if they're on board, they're on board. And sometimes they will not take these other opportunities that may be paying 2 or 3 times more what they're getting because they catch this vision. So it's much better for us to actually be supporting people for those things. And if they leave, but they're leaving better, and they're leaving with a good feeling about the company. And so that also has some good vibes to it, and also generates goodwill where other people will want to come in, rather than if they feel like they're stifled and they don't have these opportunities, they're not going to be, somebody who lets the company know or lets people know that company is a good place to work.
Yeah, especially when they get on Glassdoor.com.
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Seen that movie. So tell us more about what you have on your website. I see several things that are on here. There's some, I believe, some coaches. Sorry, my COVID brain is still active. I see, some speaking services of coaching, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, how do you get this type of a message out there? It's got to be in lots of different ways. Mm-hmm. So, of course, was very glad to be asked to come on your podcast. Your podcast is very well revered and everything, and so I appreciate that. And so I do attend lots of different podcasts and participate there, speaking, on stages, for innovation groups, VC groups, also for corporate players, helping them, get. I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm a transformational speaker. So there's a big difference there. I'm trying to inspire, help people understand how to inspire, empower, to thrive. And motivation lasts only so long, but what you need to do is actually provide those tools to help people, transform their thinking into the way that they do things. And then if that absorbs into a larger organization, then the whole organization is transformed, so that the sum of all the parts together is much greater than just the parts separate. And that's the goal there. So yeah, the speaking, and then I do private coaching for executives and people who are trying to reinvent themselves or reinvent their organizations. So I help them in that regard. I do, because of my background in technology transfer, I've got not just the business aspects and everything, but I've also got the understanding of like intellectual property, how that comes into play here, and then productization. How do you pull that off? Because I've worked with lots of incubators and lots of product, development groups, and then having worked in, I did some consulting for medical lasers, that's medical and dental lasers, and took their opportunities around the Asia Pacific realm, and then also a software distributor helping them build a Pacific Rim division. But what I've done is I've also helped governments. One of the things that's fascinating to me that most people don't know about is that there's a reason why the United States has been such an innovation engine throughout the world. And it started before 1980. What happened with all of the intellectual property that was developed with research funding from the United States, it all went back to the US. The US owned everything. So if you think about the Raiders of the Lost Ark, that last scene with that big warehouse and all these things all over the shelves and everything and not being able to find anything, think about that in 1979, that's what was happening with all these technologies. And so nothing was getting out the door. And it actually took two people from both sides of the aisle to come together and actually have some consensus going on here that something needed to be changed. And that was Birch Bayh from the Democratic Party and Bob Dole from the Republican Party. They reached across, they put together what was called the Bayh-Dole Act. And the Bayh-Dole Act, what it did was that it allowed the universities or the national laboratories, the people who were running the national laboratories, to actually own the intellectual property. But they had the obligation to make sure that they did something with that intellectual property that would be profitable for the common person. So that usable, solving problems and everything. And so from that activity, you created this whole new world where all of a sudden, startups were coming out, technologies were being licensed to larger companies. If you take out your smartphone, most of the technologies that are in your smartphone came from technology transfer from universities and national laboratories. Your GPS component, your touch screen, all those different things came from national labs and research universities. One of the largest organizations that is probably the most valuable technology transfer thing was Google. That came from Stanford. That would never have come about if there wasn't technology transfer. You can look at a lot of these big players, and especially in the biotech realm, your drugs, your devices, most of that is coming from these collaborations between these organizations, these companies, and these research organizations. So because of my work in technology transfer and then my speaking different languages, I was asked by the Japanese government in 1999 to help them put their Bayh-Dole Act equivalent together in the region of Hyogo Prefecture. So this is Kobe. And if you remember, it was 10 years before this time frame in 1989 that there was that major earthquake. And so Japan had been spending lots of time and money putting their infrastructure back together, getting their roads and their ports rebuilt and all that. And so now they were working on the economic development aspect. And so they decided that they needed to do something similar to the US in regards to enabling the economy to actually start taking off and building this innovation ecosystem. So I was tasked to put together a technology transfer office in Hyogo, which would be a regional office, which would be working with all the different universities, teaching them how to go ahead and do these types of things. And I've done that same activity in parts of it in Singapore and in mainland China and everything, because these people recognize that Bayh-Dole Act was so important. There's 18 countries in the world that have created laws that mimic the Bayh-Dole Act. Okay. And so we're seeing them actually have, these reinvigorated aspects of innovation come into play for them. But the Bayh-Dole Act is something that's created, trillions of dollars worth of value for the US and the world, and then all the products that it's actually helped. So that's another thing, is that I do not just the consulting or the coaching and the mentoring, but I also coach people in regards to how to build these innovation ecosystems and how to, capitalize on what they have versus what they need to get things moving a little bit further, and then how they put those pieces together, and then how do you enable everybody to actually get that buy-in to really push that thing forward.
You got to get people to buy in, or it doesn't work. And I noticed on your website you have a free consultation. Is that how people can reach out to you on board?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Mm-hmm.
There we go. It's been super insightful to have you on. Give us your final thoughts, John. Tell people how they can onboard you, reach out to you, and your .coms.
Actually, this week on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and this will date this podcast, but I have a thing called the Sync to Scale Intensive. And it's a 3-day event which talks about the different components of the sync system and how you can actually, inspire, enable, and thrive as a leader so that your company and everything can go forward. If people are interested in that, they just need to look up Sync to Scale. It's Sync to Scale, which is the .com, and that will get them to that place. And then also mutualprosperity.com to find the company itself.
Awesome sauce. Awesome sauce. Thank you very much for enlightening us, John, and improving the quality of our lives and giving us something to think about in leadership and companies, and how we can utilize employees better, because there's nothing more wasted when a company puts a lot of time into recruiting people and then bringing them in, and then if they don't support them, they leave. And most people leave companies over poor leadership and poor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I left all mine. I'm leaving right now. No, I'm just kidding. I got plenty of stuff for the Chris Voss Show. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for coming on, John. Thanks to our audience for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss one, the TikTokity, and all this crazy place on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. Where else?